Hey everyone, my story begins many, many years ago. I'm going to bring you back to when I was in eighth grade about 20 years ago. Um, when I was in eighth grade, my dad had his first heart attack and he was only 46. Later that year, when I was a freshman in high school, my mom had her first heart attack at age 45. So as a young person, I was really thrown into the pain of having sick parents, and having that fear of what would happen to them. My mom went on to have many reoccurring heart attacks. And in each of those experiences, I thought I was going to lose my mom. I can remember coming home from work at age 19 and finding my mom on the floor having a heart attack. And it's places and experiences like those that have made such a huge impact on my health journey today. Even in my own health history, when I was in high school, like I said, my mom was having numerous recurring heart attacks. And so she asked my pediatrician to check my lipid panel, which I don't think is standard when you're 15 years old, is how old I was then. But my pediatrician went ahead and ran a lipid panel checking my cholesterol levels like you would typically have done. And when the results came back, my cholesterol was worse than both of my parents had ever been, which is just kind of crazy to think, because at the time I was playing multiple sports. I was really physically fit, had tons of energy. I mean, I was young, super young. And so that really planted a seed in my mind of, what we look like on the outside, and even how we're feeling does not always match what's going on the inside. And so, of course I was bulletproof at that age. And so I didn't really make a whole lot of changes, but my pediatrician did, hint to the fact, or at least shed some light on the fact that what I was eating mattered. And so that was the first seed, like I said, that got planted of what I was putting on the end of my fork mattered. Even if I was super thin with a six-pack and could run, for hours on end and had tons of energy, it still didn't matter. That I needed to think about the foods that I was eating. And so fast forward a couple years after college, I had the amazing opportunity to live and work in Gamboa, Panama in Central America. And while I was living there, it was just very common for me to talk to people from multiple different countries. And what I learned is that many of my new friends that I had down in Central America, like I said, from many different countries around the world, were in their 20s and 30s, and they had never, ever, I've met person after person after person who had never, ever known a single person to have ever had a heart attack. And I was like, what? Because I was in my early 20s. And at that time, like I said, my mom, she had had about 6 heart attacks. She had had a stroke. My dad had had his early heart attack that I mentioned, and then also life-saving carotid artery surgery. So I was like, okay, so that was another big seed that got planted, that something was different. And I was older, so I was starting to connect the dots, like what we were eating and how we were living may really tie into the fact that, these people I was meeting from different countries were not having the same experiences. Because, even though not everyone's family in the United States looked like mine, many of my friends at least had a grandparent or someone who had had a heart attack. So a few years later, I got married. And when I became a wife, that was another really instrumental part of my journey, because then I was really truly adulting, going to the grocery store, making choices about what I was going to feed myself and my husband, and starting to think about our future babies. At that time, my parents' health was still not great. Type 2 diabetes was starting to rear its head in both of my parents, and I knew I didn't want that for my family. I didn't want that for myself. It's a really hard spot to be in, to be a young person and not know if your parents are going to be there with you and know that their health is declining. And so I didn't want that for myself, for my husband, for our family, for our future kiddos. So like I said, I was becoming more intentional throughout my 20s. And then when we got pregnant with our first child, I was borderline gestational diabetic. So had borderline gestational diabetes, which again, I looked super healthy on the outside, was very active, felt great in my pregnancy, but my blood was showing something different. The insides didn't really match what was going on the outside. And so I became super intentional and luckily had beautiful pregnancies, super healthy children, even in my later pregnancy. So that's great. But again, I was up against what am I going to feed my kids and how am I going to do well? And about that time when our first child was 2 years old, this healthy living revolution stepped into my life. And I was magnetically drawn to what they were doing and how they were doing it to, let me just tell you what first happened. Okay, so a friend of mine was growing fresh greens in her living room in the middle of winter in the state of Indiana. Okay, so like nothing's green in Indiana in the winter. Obviously some things are, but you get the point. And so I was magnetically drawn to this. How is she doing that? I wanted to do that. I really had this vision for growing food in our home that was at eye level for our 2-year-old at the time. I wanted her to see it. I wanted our daughter to be a part of it. And I wanted her to eat it, right? That was the ultimate goal, that she would eat it. I was also teaching high school science at the time. And so not only did I want to impact my own family and my own little kiddo at the time, but I wanted to impact our school and my students. I wanted to bring them into this. And so that's what happened. We started growing food in our home year round, and we brought it into our classroom, into our schools. And something magic happened. It's really what happened. And I just couldn't turn it off. I kept seeing these young children being part of the growing process, growing their own food, eating their food at school, and having a freaking blast, which was so cool. Okay, so that is what has led me on this journey that I'm walking today, where we're creating positive, fun experiences around eating vegetables in schools. And I have everything to thank to this community walked into my life. And so what I say to that is also, the way it's impacted even my own journey. Okay, before this community walked into my life, I didn't even know what plant-based meant. Like, I actually had no idea when someone was like, oh yeah, just use this plant-based milk. And so I'm like, okay, what is that? And here I am, not even a full 5 years later, I'm actually fully plant-based for prevention of heart disease. And there's no turning back. So I'm so thankful that, like I said, that this community walked into my life, but I'm thankful that I was open and willing to follow what I was magnetically being drawn to. There's like a quote that says, what excites you, this isn't the exact quote, but what excites you is connected to your purpose. And that could not be any more true, okay? So I was so excited about creating these fun experiences for kids in school about eating vegetables, because let's talk about this. Early heart disease, early diabetes, young children with type 2 diabetes, that is spanning our whole culture. I mean, everything from low socioeconomic status to, let's say parents making $400,000 a year, they're still under the same issue or the same situation in our country where it is so much harder you're going against the grain, right, to eat well. All the convenient foods are not foods that are fueling our bodies well. And so this spans all throughout our culture and our country. And so I'm getting off on a tangent, but it matters, right? And I'm so thankful to know that and coming to step into these truths that our bodies are designed to feel well. And when we fuel them with what they need, so when we give our bodies what they need, they can thrive. They will thrive. And scientific studies actually show time and time and time again that more plant nutrition, so getting more nutrients from plants, has the power to reverse really detrimental diseases like heart disease. So actually reverse heart disease, not just prevent it, but reverse it. How powerful is that? There's so much hope in that Our genetics do not define our destiny, okay? We are not hopeless victims of our genetics, and our choices do matter, okay? That is what I'm excited to share with you today, and it's been such a huge part of this journey for me. And I have no doubt in my mind that God has just woven this community into my life for such purpose. And I'm so thankful that I followed that magnetic pull to this this community and to this growing process of growing food and enjoying it. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. And I encourage you to follow the things that excite you. Make time for that and grow into that and let that evolve into something bigger than you could have ever imagined. So have a wonderful Tuesday.